Soulframe's starting equipment is a lot better than it seems when you first get into game. The weapons may not be the strongest of their type, but they are definitely capable of taking on anything the world throws at you, and the starting packs are all incredibly powerful once you know how to use them. Today we're looking at each of the Prelude's 10 starting loadouts, and I'm going to show you how to get the most out of the choice you made. Before we get into build specifics, let's cover a few general notes about leveling an Envoy. You increase your Envoy's rank by leveling up packs and weapons. As your rank increases, you'll get more virtue points to spend on your builds. Every allocated virtue point also increases your life, so spending these points will make you both stronger and tougher. Almost everything you do in Soulframe will grant some amount of experience for leveling packs and weapons, from claiming moats and healing world trees to killing enemies and completing Sparrow's Tails. There are ways to power level, but as a new Envoy I don't recommend it. You're going to want materials and fragments from every part of the game, so you might as well level up through doing the various quests and dungeons that will get you those items anyway. Do your fables first and get all your ancestors in your Nightfold, and after that focus on faction tales and open world boss encounters. This will get you the best combination of experience, fragments, standing, and even crafting materials as long as you remember to break boxes and loot chests as you go. Weapons can be enhanced through combat arts, but you don't get 1 point per level. Instead, you gain points at certain milestones as you level a weapon up to 30 for the first time, for a total of 5 points for each unique weapon. Packs, on the other hand, get an upgrade point for every level, so a maxed out pact will have 30 points to spend on upgrades. Pact abilities unlock at specific milestones as you level, but the order in which they unlock varies by pact. You start out with one ability, unlock another at level 5, and get the last one at level 10. Each pact ability has a somewhat hidden rank that increases as you level up the pact. I say somewhat hidden because you can see notifications pop up when an ability gets improved, but there's nowhere I've found in-game to look at the stats of how these abilities function. You will definitely feel the difference though, so don't judge your pact based on how its abilities feel when you first get them. Every starting pact is very strong, but some of the abilities really need the scaling from their max rank to fully shine. With that covered, let's get into some builds. To make these beginner-friendly, I'm going to stick to starting equipment plus Nettle since that's our only sidearm craftable at Bond 1 with 2 Volcanae, and 5 combat arts each for your main weapon and sidearm. I won't be using any moats because we know a moat rework is coming, and I want these beginner builds to be useful even in future updates. For the same reason I won't talk much about starting armor sets since we know these will change in the future, but I will tell you which armor stats you should prioritize for each build. I'll be using 10 virtue points since that's how many you'll have after leveling 1 pact, 1 main weapon, and 1 sidearm. Finally, keep in mind that this is not the only way to build these packs. These builds are meant to help you out as you learn the game. If you're an experienced Envoy, share some of your favorite build tips in the comments to help new players find a playstyle that will work for them. Alright, let's begin with the Courage build. This choice will start you off with Tethren as your pact, the long blade Wulder as your main weapon, and a totem that gives you 1 point in Courage. Tethren is probably the most challenging pact to play early on, but it gets crazy powerful maxed out. Tethren starts you off with Fellust, an insanely good ability, but you won't feel it until it ranks up at least once. Fellust increases your weapon damage with each successful hit. A max-ranked Fellust gives 5 charges to your weapon when you cast it. Each hit consumes 1 charge and applies a damage multiplier, but this multiplier starts at 1, so no extra damage. Your second hit applies an extra amount to the multiplier which scales based on your courage. Now, I don't know what the exact math is on this, but subsequent hits increase that damage multiplier cumulatively. This means if you hit all 5 times, your 5th hit does a crazy amount of damage. There is one big caveat that keeps this ability from being incredibly overpowered. An attack that misses or gets blocked will consume 2 charges, which means that even a single miss or blocked attack significantly reduces how much damage you can get out of that ability cast. In this way, Fellust heavily incentivizes patient and careful gameplay. Since you're starting out with a melee weapon, you'll need to pay careful attention to enemy animations so that you don't spend a charge on blocking enemies, but the reward is a phenomenal damage buff. The next ability you get with Tethren is Call of the Ancients, an aura that taunts nearby enemies, boosts your armor, and gives you a damage buff. Only the damage buff scales, again with Courage. Both the damage and the armor buffs are fairly modest, but being able to draw aggro away from another Envoy can be extremely useful in group play, especially if that other Envoy is using Oscelda. Tethren's last ability is Clash, which deals stagger to enemies around you and reduces your stagger taken. This is a great way to deal with groups of enemies. The range is pretty small, so it's best to use this ability when you're already in a melee engagement. It often won't be enough to break an enemy's stagger bar, especially if you haven't already done some amount of stagger to them, but it will increase your block capacity, so this is a powerful tool to use mid-fight. Just like Fellust and Call of the Ancients, only your courage affects Clash, increasing the amount of stagger it deals and the reduction of your stagger taken. Now that we know how Tethren's abilities work, we can build around them. We're going to put all 10 virtue points into courage, since they will boost all of our pact abilities. This will also boost our damage from Wulder, which has an attunement cap of 36. This means our weapon damage won't increase beyond its rating at 36 courage, but all of the buffs from our pact abilities will, so in the case of Tethren, it is worth going beyond 36 courage if you can later on. For now, just put as much into courage as you can. For pact upgrades, we first want to unlock Mora's Pride and then get as much courage from it as we can. After that, we're going to put points into Rooted to increase the amount we can block. What's left over we can put into Last Stand, Akin, Conqueror, or Everbound, in whatever amounts you like most. I like having my buffs up as quickly as possible, so I max out Akin first. Then with only 3 points left, I take one upgrade in Conqueror because that heal is really nice to have, and I put my last point into Everbound for that extra bit of HP. For our long blade combat arts, we're going to take Smite, Riposte, and Vaunt for our first 3, since Riposte are going to be a great way to both protect our stagger bar and get Fellust hits. You want Vaunt because Smites are going to help with your ability cooldowns, since the souls you grab will recharge the ability of their corresponding colors. From there you can go for Unyielding so that you can parry enemy heavy attacks, making it even easier for you to get those Riposte hits for your Fellust, and then Swift Parry to make that timing a bit easier. Once you get more combat arts and get used to the parry timing, you might want to drop Swift Parry and go for the Vaunt upgrades instead, or put points into Helmgong and then Headlong for stronger and faster heavy attacks. For our short blade combat arts, we're going to take Perfect Throw, Pointed Greeting, Hollow Hilt, Oiled Scabbard, and then for now we can put the last point into Smite, but as you get more points for your arts, you'd want to put them into Pointed Greetings upgrades instead. Nettle scales with Grace, so its damage is going to be really low in this build. That's alright because we're really only using Nettle as a ranged utility. Its throw is much faster than Wulder's, especially with these upgrades, so it's going to help you out in situations when you need range. That said, you'd want to replace this with a Courage scaling sidearm as soon as you can. Grin is definitely the easier one to get and can use these same arts to great effect, but Flyblades are extremely strong with Tethren if you can manage to get Precles. As you get access to more armor, you'll want to look for sets that have high stability defense. You need to be able to block attacks while you wait for the right opportunity to strike, so the more stability you've got, the better. Physical defense will also help for when your block breaks or when you choose to take a hit to secure a Fellust charge, which leaves magic defense as your lowest priority. To use this build, you're going to activate your Fellust before combat even starts, since it has no duration, just charges. And then you're going to pre-buff with Call of the Ancients. Then close with your enemies, get in a hit or two, and use Clash as soon as all of your opponents are in range. Be patient, block when you need to, parry to prevent yourself from taking too much stagger, and pay attention to what the softlock has you fighting so that you don't waste any Fellust charges. The softlock is really the only downside to this build. You have to fight what the game locks you onto, because the attack spam that sometimes helps you switch targets can too easily cause you to lose your Fellust charges. Hopefully DE is already working on some solutions for this. If you decide to use Flyblades instead of Nettle, think carefully about when you cast Fellust. If you start your blades orbiting before you cast Fellust, they will neither consume Fellust charges nor get the damage bonus from Fellust, even if they strike enemies after you cast it. If you orbit your blades after casting Fellust, the orbit will consume 3 charges and the damage bonus will be applied to all hits. Hopefully you can see now how even though Tethren feels like one of the weakest packs when you start out, it is actually incredibly strong when you level it up. Next up we have the Spirit build. This choice starts you off with Oscelda as your pact, the staff Gwylen as your main weapon, and a totem that gives you 1 point in Spirit. Oscelda's abilities are all quite strong right from the start. The ability you start with is Elder Bloom, a static healing flower that doesn't seem to have any virtue scaling at all. Elder Bloom's heal over time ticks quickly enough that the small heal per tick is still quite powerful, although I would not be surprised if scaling is added later on as our envoys get more virtue points and thus a larger health pool. The next ability you unlock is Phantom Flock, which will CC a target with a flock of birds that deal small ticks of damage and stagger that scale with courage. The flock can also deal splash damage as well as stagger and CC to enemies within a modest fixed range. If its target dies, the flock will move to the next closest enemy within range until its duration expires, which scales with Spirit. Oscelda's last ability is Bestown, which petrifies its target and 3 other enemies within range. If you don't get a direct hit, you'll still freeze 3 enemies within range of wherever the ability's projectile lands, and this range scales with Grace. When you break the freeze, that enemy will take some damage that scales with Courage. If you don't break the freeze, they will stay petrified until the ability's duration runs out, which scales with Spirit. Overall, we're going to want to prioritize Spirit and play around long ability durations. We definitely want to get to 27 Spirit, which is Gwylen's attunement cap, and then from there we can decide how to spend our remaining virtue points. The best way to go about this is to do our pact upgrades first. I like to fully max out Sapphine's Gift and Iridis's Favor, then unlock and upgrade Akin for the cooldown reduction, and then put the rest of my points into 2 Tendril upgrades. Then I can put 4 virtue points into Spirit to hit Gwylen's attunement cap, and then 6 points into Grace for more range on Bestown and more damage out of Nettle. Once you get Verdigris, you can either keep the extra range if you like how it plays, or put points into Courage instead if you want to buff your flock. Quick side note here, the answer you give Orengal during her quest gives you a permanent boost to one of your virtues. I chose the Spirit answer on this character, giving me 1 extra point in Spirit. If you chose Grace or Courage, then you'll need to spend 5 points in Spirit instead of 4. This build would give you a very short downtime between when one flock ends and the next flock can be cast, and your Bestown will be castable well before the previous one runs out, although doing so won't refresh its duration. If you're standing in water, you'll be able to do this with Phantom Flock as well, since we took that one node in Vernal Pool. Vernal Pool is quite strong, but I don't like to rely on it alone for my cooldown management since some water sources don't trigger it, and you can't always guarantee that there will be water nearby when you need it. For magic arts, we're going to take Grounded, Mirror Spell, Helm Gong, and Headlong, since heavy attacks are going to be super helpful for breaking stagger bars and fighting bosses and Biselcams. We also want Unhindered, but remember to be careful about how many enemies you hit with your heavy attacks, because your primary defense is the freeze from Bestown. This time we're using our sidearm primarily for melee combat, so we want Smite, Riposte, Swift Parry, and Vaunt. You can put the last point into Perfect Throw if you like, but as soon as you get a 6, I'd upgrade Vaunt for the higher Smite chance, and try to get as much cooldown reduction as possible out of short blade combat. We want Riposte here because you can't parry with a magic weapon, and your stagger bar is going to fill very fast when you block, so when you have to fight in melee combat you want to use your sidearm. For armor, you'll want to prioritize physical and magical defense. You're not going to want to block much with this build, so you're better off making sure you can survive getting hit when it happens. Your starting armor doesn't have any magic defense, but again, we know this will change in a future update. For now, look to replace it with pieces from the Blacksmith set or Garen Rude set. The best way to use this build is to start your fights with Bestown. Then if there's more than one enemy left unfrozen, kite them out of range of the petrified enemies, then use Phantom Flock and kite around it. This will catch the adds in the CC splash and make everything easier to deal with. You can cast Bestown again as soon as it's up to freeze anything left unfrozen, and then just pick targets one by one to unfreeze and kill. Drop your Elder Bloom whenever you are safe to do so, and run back to it when you need healing. This is definitely not the fastest way to fight in Soulframe, but for now it's going to save you a lot of pre-alpha related headaches. Oscelda has the most bugs of the 3 starting packs and suffers even more from softlock targeting issues than Tethren does. That said, this is one of the newest packs, so let's give DE some time to smooth out the rough edges. In the meanwhile, Oscelda is extremely fun to play in a group, especially when someone else is playing Tethren and can pull aggro away from you. In fact, once the bugs get worked out, this might end up being my favorite pact, especially if we get a spirit bow. Finally, we've got our Grace build. This choice gives you Sirin as your pact, the bow Thistle as your main weapon, and a totem that gives you 1 point in Grace. Sirin starts you off with Glamour, an ability that turns you into butterflies, essentially making you invisible and making enemies vulnerable to finishers. Dealing or taking damage ends the invisibility, and the max duration scales with Spirit. Next you get Trick of the Light, which creates a decoy that will taunt enemies in its range. If an enemy is nearby, it will explode after about 4 seconds, dealing AoE damage that scales with Courage and a radius that scales with Grace. Your decoy will last for a duration that scales with Spirit, but won't explode if there aren't enemies nearby, and always explodes about 4 seconds after an enemy gets near it. Sirin's last ability unlock is Pictrix Powder, which will CC every enemy in a range that scales with Grace, plus it deals a tiny amount of damage that modestly scales with Courage, but the duration is fairly short and does not scale with Spirit. So, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, Sirin doesn't really have a single virtue that you want to prioritize before you put points into the others. Glamour is really useful in a lot of situations, but without enough spirit it doesn't last very long. Trick of the Light's explosion damage can be quite impressive if you boost it with some courage, but you also want to give it range to hit more enemies. And Pictrix powder has no target limit, so with enough grace you can CC an entire battle. What this means is that Sirin benefits almost equally from all three virtues, so how you assign your virtue points is going to depend on your weapon. Since we're starting with Thistle, we need 28 grace to hit attunement cap. For our pact upgrades, we're going to max out Sapphine's Gift and then max out Pickpocket. Pickpocket now requires enemies to be fully unalerted for you to get loot from them, which means once they've seen you, you can't use Pickpocket to get extra drops. Even so, there are some fragments in the game that currently only drop from enemies. Since Pickpocket guarantees a loot drop, this upgrade vastly reduces your farming time even if you're still at the mercy of RNG to get the drop you want. It's also a great way to get Drax, so while you might want to reset out of Pickpocket as you get further into the game, when you're starting out, this upgrade is going to help you get the drops you need to progress. You want to max it out because that will cause Pickpocket to proc faster, and with a low duration on your glamour, you need it to proc before your invisibility expires. Next, we're going to put as many points as we can into Mora's Pride, and then go back and put our last 2 points into upgrading Eridus' Favor. All 10 of your virtue points can go into Grace, so we can hit that 28 Grace attunement cap for Thistle. On this character, I chose the Grace answer with Orangol, so I only have to put 9 points in Grace, and I can put the last one in Courage. This is going to leave us with a pretty weak decoy explosion and a short glamour duration, so our playstyle is going to rely more on the utility of our pact abilities and on our weapons for damage. As your Envoy ranks up and you get more virtue points, you can put them into Courage first to buff your decoy damage, and then Spirit if you want more time with your butterflies. For bow arts, we want Splinter, Fletching, Rife Knocked, Barbed Point, and Brittle Arrow to help us unshield enemies. As you earn more points in bow arts, upgrade Barbed Point and Rife Knocked. My leg is also a fun one to play with, but not quite as powerful as enhancements for the Splinter mechanic. I personally don't find Smite very useful on bow, since my targets are often too far away to grab souls, but if you play at closer range than me, this might be different for you. Nettle is a great companion for Thistle, and our short blade arts are going to be the same as the ones we used for our Spirit build. Smite, Riposte, Swift Parry, and Vaunt, with additional points going into Vaunt's upgrades and then Smite. When you do get into melee combat, those smites are very useful. Armor priorities for this build are also pretty similar to our Spirit build. The starting armor for Grace gives you more physical armor than anything else, and very little magic armor, which isn't the worst setup, but I'd look to swap out one piece for something from the blacksmith set as soon as you can. To use this build, start with a hail of arrows, and then while that hail is activating, shoot your decoy right in the center of where it lands. This will draw enemies into your hail, leaving you free to charge a shot to splinter its arrows. Then you can take a few shots as enemies run towards you and disappear with glamour before they get close to you, then reposition for a finisher. From there, I'll pick off some enemies with ranged attacks first and use my decoy off cooldown to keep myself out of danger. If I'm up against a shield enemy, I'll either use Hail and Splinter to break the stagger, or use Glamour to get behind for a finisher. And that wraps up our beginner builds. I hope this video helped you better understand your starting pact, and that it serves as a foundation for you to create your own builds as you rank up. If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to support my channel, a like or a subscribe is a huge help. And until next time, happy hunting!